Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Robert Roth. I'm a professor here in the Department of Geography. I'm also the faculty director of the CART Lab, which for those online, this is where we're broadcasting this event. And this is the last lecture in the series of map chats hosted by the GIS professional programs. For just a quick background, the map chats are meant to be a complement to our more research-focused intertwined lecture series that is focused more on professional development. And often we love to bring our prestigious alum back and get to learn the lessons from their careers. Before I move forward, I want to share our remembrance of Carl Sack, who unfortunately had a cardiac arrest last week. Today we'll be going off life support to donate his organs. Carl received a master's degree from our department in 2013 and a PhD in 2018. And I know many of you know Carl either as a student here or through NACIS, but even if you didn't, you are absolutely impacted by the work that he did when he was part of the geography department and CART Lab. Before Carl came back to grad school, he was actually a high school teacher, and he helped me as a first-year professor think about sort of pedagogy and instruction from kind of an educational training perspective. Carl was the developer of Geography 378, one of the developers of Geography 378, which is one of the foundational courses for our professional programs and for our major. He also was really influential in the creation of Geography 575. Carl, if you take it 575, you know this is kind of a research project as well as a course. Carl was one of the first students in the diary study where I made folks track their emotions as they were developing using various different kinds of technology. With A timers every hour, they had to write down emotion. Knowing Carl, he's always kind of like frustrated until he got things to work. He then used his dissertation project to compartmentalize our labs into a sequence of shorter modules, something called scaffold design, to help creative designers learn programming. So coming from a more creative perspective rather than a computer science perspective. Carl also was important in bringing a scholar activist dimension to the CART Lab, which is two projects that I want to mention. First, in his master's thesis, he developed an online wiki map to capture non-economic landscape values in the Bad River Reservation and watershed in northern Wisconsin. There was a proposal for open pit mining that would destroy, among other things, the wild rice that was an important part of the reservation's food source. And the maps he created were actually circulated at the Capitol. I've heard firsthand stories that they were influential in blocking that legislation. The second, Carl was very active in the protest against the Dakota Access Pipeline in the Standing Rock Reservation. And was the first to compile various treaties to really demonstrate the impact and the historical sort of ownership of that land. And ultimately, those maps, in collaboration with New York Times, were published and circulated to millions of people online. And so it's a very somber day, but I know Carl would want us to be together. He was always about community, and I think there's great value in coming together in moments like this. For those that don't know, we have a potluck after this at my house. Everyone's welcome. If you aren't on the listserv yet, you're going to get on that. Please talk to me after if you're interested in joining. And I'm really thankful and grateful that one of the people bringing us together is an alum, Clare Trainor, who also was a student with Carl. And so Claire graduated with a bachelor's degree in cartography and GIS in 2016. I can't believe it's already been that long. It was an absolute stalwart in the CART Lab as an undergrad, really one of our VIPs. You're kind of like the direct assistant to Tanya at the time that they know, who is actually leading us in the CART Lab. One of the various stories as I'm getting older, as I'm just reflecting, I'm having these like flashbacks to moments in office hours. And my flashback that I was remembering today, I'll actually close this Snapchat, was this wonderful funnel project in Geography 370. And Claire, I don't know if you remember this, and actually I don't even know if this is fully true. But I remember you probably get feedback on office hours, and just sort of saying like, what more can we do, right? This is a map showing the percentage of female leadership in parliaments around the world. And I think an offhand comment was, well, maybe try to label all the countries in the world. I probably gave you 12 hours of work, 24 hours before the deadline, but I think it was a really impressive final project and one that won the Barnabart Pachetnik Award in design. And as a personal anecdote, I think you accepted this idea in my brain. This data set is also one of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals around gender equality. And the middle divider in the textbook that the Cartograph made is the exact same data set. And absolutely Clare designed it better. So you can look at that. Since Clare has graduated, she's kind of the part of what we might call the Mount Rushmore of cartographic design firms. She's worked in National Geographic, Mapbox, Esri, and has always brought a really great sort of design perspective into those groups. So Clare today is a cartographer at Reuters, and I'm really happy that we're going to get to learn about her experiences, her process, her pathway as our last Mac chat of the year. And so with that, it's my gratitude and real pleasure. I give you Clare Trainor of Reuters.
Thank you so much, Rob. I'm really excited to be here. My name is Claire. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm really excited to talk about historical data and just finding creative ways to tell informative narratives through graphics. I hope this can just give you a bit of insight into and interested in cartography as a career, specifically journalism, but also just like if you want to know what happens. So currently I work as a data visualization developer at Reuters, but I'd also like to say I'm a journalist, I'm a graphics editor, I'm a photographer, data analyst, designer. I think there's a lot of different ways that you can describe this field, and I also just feel very strongly that cartographers wear a lot of hats. So there's really no one job title that can describe all of the parts that you do. I currently work out of my home office in Boulder, Colorado, but I'm in town for my wedding, which is going to be on Saturday. So I hope this presentation is somewhat decently put together, and wedding brain has definitely been a little crazy. So if you all want clarification on anything throughout this. So I just wanted to start, what do I do outside of my day-to-day, just to give you an insight about who I am before I got into photography. I love to cook. I definitely got into the bread making fad. And during COVID, my partner and I made a paella during Thanksgiving in 2019, and now we make it for all of these huge get-togethers with friends and family. We even made it at a park in San Francisco. And also when we were living in San Francisco, there's a lot of good sushi or like fish markets. So this is us making sushi every once in a while. I also just love being outdoors, hiking, rock climbing, backpacking. This is us space climbing. Just being outdoors is really important to us. Partly why we recently just to be a little bit closer to the mountains. So yeah, now what you all came to hear me talk about. So I graduated the University of Madison in 2016, and I grew up in Wisconsin, just outside of Madison, actually, and so was really excited to come here. But I also had no idea what I wanted to do. When I went to college, I actually was flipping around between zoology, science. I was halfway through a orders degree, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to work in a hospital or go to grad school, because you do 2-year master's degree for that. And I spent the summer going in circles, and my dad works with GIS, and he sat me down and was like, "You want to look at this?" And I saw him plotting points for groundwater, and I was like, "That looks pretty interesting." So that junior year in the fall, I ended up taking my first 370, and I loved it. Rob was actually my professor, which was awesome. And yeah, I fell in love with it. And so I thought, this university is so large, but also this department is great. There's just a lot of wonderful mentors, a lot of really great peers, and a lot of really great opportunities. Oh yeah, so this is like from Cart Lab or from the geography department. During my time here, we actually got to go take a trip to New York City, and this is us visiting New York Times, which was a great experience, getting to meet alumni and get to see like an actual newsroom experience. It made me so excited to like want to work in news one day. And then we also visited the New York Public Library to look at different maps. I don't know, still think the map lab, the map library up there is maybe my favorite though. So what drew me to maps is just like, they're not really pretty pictures. They provide stories, they provide explanations, but they can also make a lot of arguments. And I just fell in love with this intersection between design, data, and geography. And I really became quite fascinated by any of the design principles and communicate geographic data. I actually suck at drawing. It's like really scary to me. And so one really nice thing about cartography is that I just thought it was a little bit like painting by the numbers. And I also think it's just such an interdisciplinary space. You can bring so many backgrounds to it. And so today I work with people who are coming at it from researchers, they're educators, they're illustrators. So you don't need to be a cartographer to make a map or work in data visualization. You really can come at it from a lot of different angles. I also just love this cross and intersection between space and place and the relationship that can be told through maps. So it's just, it can be shaped so much by the relationship you have to a space. And today when I'm a photographer, I'm often trying to help readers feel like they're connected to the maps and charts that I'm making, just to make them have a sense of that place, even if they're not tied to it or know that location. So yeah, so after graduating, I got really lucky and I got an internship with the Esri Story Maps team. Well, it's a huge software company. I got to work on a really neat part of the company called Story Maps, which is a small R&D team. And Story Maps allow users to combine maps, images, videos, and text to tell compelling stories with spatial context. And I just love that this product helps facilitate and share more information than just visuals and straight PDFs. So we were working a lot with government agencies. They were like probably our #1 users who had this big PDF that they wanted to like share internally, so they could, rather than just like dropping maps in and putting it on an FTP site or something, they were able to create this like, beautiful share link, how the maps could be interactive, so you could follow a bunch of GIS and have that move around. And so it was really fun experience as an intern to start thinking a little bit about the storytelling process with maps post school. And then I went to I'm trying to be like put together so I didn't mess anything up. Oh yeah, okay. So I went to the Scouts Department of Corrections. So when my internship ended, I actually did the job, and I was able to find one at the Department of Corrections. And here I analyzed data and design maps for policymakers. They needed informed decisions, or they didn't even make informed decisions. And so I just wanted to call this one specifically out, just because this is new data visualization experts, and you can find a lot of jobs in really analytic places. I worked with data that was all anonymized, but it provided the addresses of inmates who had been released and were going back into the community. And so I was aggregating that data to just help produce hotspot maps and just help the organization set up different services across Wisconsin so that the most people could fit. So it was a really interesting job for a few months, but then I ended up getting a job at National Geographic. I feel like this is just the cartographer's dream. Just the history of cartography there is so prominent, plus the years of journalism. So yeah, my work as a graphics journalist really started mainly in print, which was awesome because I had mostly worked in print and not digital. And these are just some of the stories that I worked on and the maps that were created for them. I probably could do an entire hour of just talking about the maps I made for National Geographic alone. So I'm happy to dive into anything specific if anyone has any questions. But this one number left is looking at color cholera cases in Yemen. The one on the left, bottom left is a map for an expedition to Antarctica by a bunch of climbers. I did one on Japanese internment, one on looking at Paul Solopek's 21,000 mile across the world. I've done something on pangolins and like being endangered and the trade of them, rhinos as well, sage-grouse population. So really like worked on a lot of different stories, and so that was really fun. I got to learn a little bit. I learned like a very niche. Each was like a very niche topic, and learned a lot from each. So after 2 years, I was just looking for a transition, and I took a pretty big jump from National Geographic. So while print graphics are really awesome, I did see the web space taking off. And I had also just seen like a lot of news organizations moving that. So that way, you know, Washington Post, New York Times making a lot more interactive maps and graphics. And I don't know, there's something so satisfying about print. You can get like physical object at the end of it, and you're like, wow, I spent hours and poured so much love into this. But I wanted to develop my skills further, so I ended up transitioning to Mapbox. And Mapbox is a mapping company that just provides innovation data to many different mobile and web applications. So examples of where you might have seen it is they create the maps for Strava, for Facebook. Oh, they might not anymore do Facebook, but they were doing Facebook for a long time. All Trails, Lonely Planet, the Weather Channel uses their services, their API, so that it can give that location in the Weather Channel. Toyota, BMW, GM, they're all now using those maps and a navigation product so that it's select models as well. And I think one thing I want to highlight is web maps are a completely different challenge to working in print. First, there's just so many more levels to design for. So essentially, when you create one map style, you're designing 22 maps for that single style. So there's a lot of curation, both on the data side, you're constantly tweaking the backend so that your web maps can be performant, but then you're also working on the design side, making sure the transition from a global view all the way down to the street level view is really nice and beautiful. I was primarily working in the automotive space and helping design some in-car navigation experiences. This included things like the core traffic map, the base map for that, and any type of user interaction between the device and map. So while you might not think that automotive maps are maybe storytelling with data, I do think that every time a driver hops into their car, there is still this storytelling aspect of wayfinding. So there's a lot of design interactions that you have to think about. You're constantly thinking like, how many feet before the turn should I be alerting the user? Red, orange, and green is not flag friendly for traffic maps, but it is like what everyone knows for traffic. And so how can you make those colors suit all users? How can we make the legibility of labels work for different sizes and resolutions of the car? Often you're trying to make one map that will work for everything, and that breaks down fundamentally after a little bit. Eventually I became a manager at Mapbox, so I was leading a team of about 7 designers on different map design projects, and I just realized how much I missed this creative process of taking very complex data and hard to understand topics and turning it into compelling stories and visuals. So eventually I took all the skills I had learned from the 3 years prior in interactive cartography and product management, and I got back actually building and informing so many people about stories that matter. I also was really excited just to reach a large number of people, inform them about different news events. So yeah, very excited. I've been at Reuters now, oh my gosh, a year and a half. So time has flown, but yeah, a year and a half so far. We have 4 different desks. So we have our Amherst desk that covers North, Central, and South America. We have EMEA, which covers Europe, Middle East, Africa, and then we have our APAC, which covers Asia Pacific, and then we have the financial graphics team, This visual is probably somewhat geographically incorrect, but it's just a general breakdown of how we operate. This gives us a lot of around the sun coverage and just gives us a lot of people to collaborate with, which is really nice. And this also means that I have my shifts really great because often we're working in this cycle where, especially if it's something major, like for example, earthquakes in Turkey, the Europe team will pick that off, then we'll transfer to our team, will pick up different tasks, we'll have a sign-off note at the end of the night, put that over back to the Asia Pacific team, moves back to, I mean, depending on the breaking news story, either it's published or we're going to go through multiple cycles. So this is really nice that we have this year. I work on, the Amherst team, but there's only 6 of us actually. We're quite a small but mighty team, which is great compared just to other news organizations. There's a lot more people when you think about Washington. And I'm just going to talk to you mostly about stories that I worked on and pitched, but our newsroom is just such an amazing and resource different story ideas. Story ideas can really come from us, from the newsroom, or they can come from a collaboration of both. This I just wanted to show is our text article template. This is what you might see if you click on any old story at Reuters.com or maybe any other news site. But we're really trying to just move away from traditional charts that convey important data in a clear and accessible way to completely out of the box ways of telling visually driven stories. So we often do this through illustrations, static graphics, scrolly experiences, maps, multimedia, and more. This is a story here that we did on the Gaza tunnels. So my coworker Adolfo, he made some of these really beautiful illustrations just to make it feel like you're going really deep into a tunnel and underground with that hero illustration. And then I got to work with some geologists in the area and look at the geology of the region, and then make some of these maps to just explain what the soil is like, and also what are some of the properties of the soil that Hamas is digging through. So this is just a good example of where we broke that text article template and really created a more immersive experience to tell the situation that's happening in Israel and Gaza. And like most graphics team, we're publishing for a pretty general audience, especially our Reuters.com readers. But like unlike most teams, we also publish graphics to a lot of other news organizations, and then those news organizations will actually embed and then customize on their site. So publish to those readers as well. So example is like BBC takes a lot of our content and then reuses it on the website. We publish for an international audience, but we primarily write in English, but I would say that we're translating more and more of our work for different languages. And even though we serve a lot of some special interest audiences, I do think we really strive to create a lot of impartial stories for a broad audience. Geographically, we focus also on stories that have a broad reach, but even with in those pieces, that have a more emotional focus, broader world and context. Just a good way to get a sense of our news judgment is on our homepage at Reuters.com/graphics. We have told stories on anything from the latest happening in Ukraine to Mariah Carey's Christmas songs, and looking at that in a fun way. We've done, I worked on this one of the hottest year, looking using actually thermal images from our photo team, and then also doing some to complement those as well. So I'm going to deep dive into a few stories I've worked on. So last year, California was getting hit by atmospheric river after atmospheric river. And we have this schedule on our team where when there is breaking news, we will hop on it, but and then take a break from our longer term projects. So a lot of us, when these atmospheric rivers were hitting, we were like, what are they? So I quickly just turned around this like short explainer that explained what atmospheric rivers and bomb cyclones were. And while I found it really interesting to work on this map and this story, I found that like so much of California was still in a drought, despite getting so much rain. So I talked to my editor and I pitched that we should continue evolving this project, even with the heavy rainfall, California had not yet escaped this drought. So now that I have this idea, I started gathering data from the U.S. Drought Monitor and monthly precipitation values from the Western Regional Climate Center. Then I moved on to just like the sketching and the puzzle solving part. These were some of my initial wireframes. So the thought I had was as I'm going to animate through all of these maps by the U.S. Drought Monitor and just show how drought conditions have become more severe over time, while also thinking about how precipitation, showing precipitation maps on top of that. But yeah, so doing sort of a map-based approach, I was plotting also some of the data in R and Python and looking a little bit more on the top right at these like heat map, like GitHub charts as well. And I showed this to my editor, and Julia, like one thing our team is always pushing us to do is to think outside of the box, especially in terms of like paragraph chart, paragraph text, or paragraph map, like push further. So I went back to the drawing board and just tried to think really big. I highly recommend that you do this for anything you start on, but I created this mood board with visual inspiration. I draw a lot of inspiration from art, bookmarks that I've had over time, got really neat data-viz pieces I've seen. I subscribe to a lot of various newsletters. They always are sharing different content that is out there, using Dribble, Splash, or other things to gather images. And then I also thought about a lot of keywords for the visuals. So try to think of like parched, thirst, brown grass, dead trees. So I think that's really important. And then started to like put my design thoughts into order. In the end, we opted for this heat map design. And we actually used one of my other coworkers' old stories about Tokyo Olympics as a bit of a North Star in this. So I started playing a lot with, we first like charted the data and plotted it to look, this is like big screenshots of it right now. But this is looking at data over the last like, I think it's 10, 15 years of data of California drought. So this is the U.S. Drought Monitor's mapping data just put into a different format. And I think we started playing with colors, and I really wanted the readers to feel like they were being surrounded by these hot and dry conditions. So this is all of everything from brown to like more of that like yellow, very saturated yellow color too, is what I was working with. And I want to call out that just because something can be a map doesn't need to be a map, even though I love maps, but sometimes charts are better, sometimes words are better. Just make sure that mapping graphic that you're creating is actually helping the story, and you're not doing it just because it's easy or what you're familiar with. I think Reuters has been really good at pushing me outside my comfort zone just to make more maps and charts and different types of data visualizations. Another visual touch we added here was like an illustrated headline. So I said I was really scared to do any type of illustration work. Now I'm doing some of that. These are just a few of the illustrations I have pulled from various different, I think Dribble is where I grabbed most of these from, and then a few of my own mock-ups are there as well. So yeah, so this is the final product. The illustrated headline is just a bit more engaging, and rather than just like straight having that whatever font you want it to be. And then as you go through, the heat map visualization shows how droughts have become more frequent and intense in California. We're also showing on the far right precipitation over time. The heat map is laying out from northern counties to southern counties. And then we're also highlighting on top of this when there were some major fires in the area as well. Finally, we did accessibility testing, and accessibility testing can sound very intimidating, but it also is super important. It doesn't take much time. So I just want to talk about 3 different tests that we run whenever we're publishing a story. And the first one is voiceover, and this is just to test the screen reading experience. So just making sure that everything that should be read out loud is, anything that shouldn't be read out loud is skipped, and then just making sure that the alt text and captures the essence of the content. So for charts, that means that the takeaway is spelled out, and for more illustrated pieces, the tone. We also do keyboard testing, so that means manual keyboard navigation to test for readers who can use the mouse. So during these tests, you're looking for, can I read the whole article without touching the mouse? Can I easily control the piece of the story? Can I navigate into through without an interactive? And then lastly, we use an axe audit, which is just mainly for flagging any contrast and markup issues. So this is the text in the background are too close in color. You might just need to shift those to darkness or lightness values, any easy and fixable issues. Yeah, I also just want to call out some other ways you can help elevate your design in small ways. So I'm not going to talk about this story fully, but I did just want to bring up another example of how small design decisions like we did for that illustration can inject and just elevate an entire piece. So most scroll templates come out of this, of the box with just like a background and scrolling text. This is really visually stimulating. I think it's not too hard to look at, but often it's just like a white or black rectangle with text moving across it. And sometimes, but not always, we can really elevate and help refine the look of your story by just changing these. So I worked with my super talented colleague Daisy, who is an amazing science illustrator, and she wanted to tell a story about deep sea mining. And so I worked on some of the maps and development for the story. But yeah, I think the heart of the story really lies in the illustrations and how the undersea environment is at risk. And so one thing we worked on towards the end of the project was just adding these little illustrated bubbles to the text flows. And while it's so small, I think it really adds some additional meaning and emotion. Like as they fly back up, I think they feel like almost bubbles rising to the surface. And I think it sort of elevated the entire aesthetic of the piece. And I even added these to the map. I thought these were really nice. They didn't need to be bubbles, but I thought they had a really nice touch, especially when we're transitioning between these two maps and the scrolling experience, and looking at both like the exploration areas as well as the various different. Oh man, Rob, I was trying to find the beaver map, and I could not find it. I don't know if you still use it. You probably don't. I found it just instead. But I think this.
Beaver had a moment where I had to cut it.
You had to cut it?
I'll bring it back after the sabbatical. But...
Okay, well, I'm going to be talking about Taylor Swift instead. I'm just going to talk about this really fun story I got to work on with Taylor Swift. I might be a little judged here, but I'm a little bit of a Swiftie. And I pitched this story at the beginning of 2023 after I got tickets to the Eras tour, and which is very stressful when Ticketmaster crashed. But I was actually really nervous to pitch this story just because it was a bit of a personal passion project, and it felt a little bit less newsworthy at the time before like she became Time Person of the Year. And I was like, well, can I really like publish this to Reuters if it's all about financial graphics? But my editor was really super supportive and told me to look at it through the triangle. And so I think if there's something you're interested in, often it will turn out a lot better because you're interested in the topic and you want to invest that time. So this is like a really fun story to work on. One of my initial ideas was actually just to talk about the tour itself, everything from the cost of the tickets to the resale values, the number of people who were attending the shows at stadiums, so on about that. And I emailed actually almost every single ticketing agency, and no one wanted to talk to me. So no one would give me data except one, and I got it from StubHub. No, CP. I got from CP. So moral of the story is like sometimes your data just doesn't pan out. Like you're like, this is such a cool idea, and I was like, oh, I could like build 3D models of stadiums and like show how many people, but yeah, that just totally got tossed out the window once I couldn't get the data. But I think the like adapt, you can definitely like always find another interesting angle into something that you're passionate about. So instead, I ended up, and this right here is just, I was still able to get the data from CP, and they were able to give me their resale values, and you can tell like her tickets were selling $1,000 more over other performers who were on tour last year. So instead, I took this angle of looking at just like these tours are so popular, and from that angle, I started just to dive into her music and want to use more of an analytical approach using Spotify metrics. So Spotify is pretty interesting in that they track and assign. They take each song and they'll have a value for each song: acousticness, its danceability, its tempo, its energy, loudness, balance, and so on. So with this data, I knew I just wanted to show like why Taylor Swift has produced songs across the musical spectrum that has really made her into this record-breaking pop star. As for design, once I knew my angle, I started to think about design, and the great part about Taylor Swift is there's design inspiration out there. Like, you have her album covers, her tour merch, her web presence. There's just numerous podcasts and documentaries about her. Plus, there's just a lot of people on Pinterest who are making new, like, I was like, I don't have to make a mood board, but here it is. So that was really great. And I also just started listening to Taylor Swift in high school when her Fearless album came out, and I just felt like all of the songs were really personal, like you were almost reading her journal. And she's also released these images on the left of like handwritten song lyrics from a few years ago that were published into a book. So the right is my very poor initial mock-up of what I was thinking and what I was like pitching to my editor, but I was like, maybe we do something with the journal layout. And so and then I also tried out, I think with any of the stories we work on, we're trying lots of different ideas. This is just a mock-up from Figma, where I was also doing more of like a data visualization approach. Still fun at the top, but trying to make it a little bit like different sound bars and almost like a tempo like look, but and also like the middle has like a ticket and showing like ticket resale values over time. So trying to incorporate more of a data viz approach into these different chart types. But my boss was like, you should just totally go all in on the journal idea. It's unique. So I went all in on that, and then I just started playing with the data. That was my next step. And so I was thinking how we want to group by album, or do we want to group it by Spotify metric? I thought about also trying to be able to play a clip when you hovered, but time constraints, and also just working with the Spotify API ended up being a little hard, so we kept that from scope. But also, you just don't know what you're going to get until you try lots of different ways of visualizing it. We even looked at like making them into different butterflies or doing box shapes. Like, here's us dancing. Like, this was just fun with my coworker. But here's an example of just like the final collage and journal-like style we had throughout the story. I chose a font that was a bit more loose and free to give the impression of handwriting without having to write it all by hand. One of my coworkers was like, you really should write by hand. And I was like, I don't think it's gonna work. So I chose a font that would work very well. And then for any of the hyperlinks, we actually used a squiggle underneath rather than a straight line, just to help mimic the feel of handwriting. Also at Reuters, if we're not collaborating with other text editors, we're actually the ones writing these stories. So this is pretty new to me, but also and very exciting, but also very nerve-wracking. So throughout this, I think we added a lot of these fun sayings where Spotify got it wrong, because sometimes these metrics just were not that great. So for example, like we added a little quote from my editor that says, "Who on earth is dancing the clean and not shake it off," just because it was like a weird, like, you know, her music, you're like, this is wrong. So we had some fun there, and I think, you know, when you are writing your stories, you get to add a lot more voice to what you're designing. So it's pretty fun. But yeah, not all of my job is working on Taylor Swift stories, sadly. We also do a lot of breaking news coverage. We have, like I was saying, the spot news shift where we rotate throughout the team, who's keeping, like we'll have every 2 weeks, one person is keeping a little bit more of an eye on breaking news, and then their entire 2 weeks is devoted to like producing any maps or graphics that come up for breaking news. And we also now, we just implemented last week, have more of a breaking news channel. So we're actively posting stories that are happening in the news, and maybe a possible visual idea to that. And then our editors are like actively watching that as well. And then they'll make the call if we want to cover that or not. So for example, when the Baltimore Bridge collapsed, that's something we would hop on right away. So one of the ones I worked on actually last year in 2023 was the flooding in Durna. And so I just wanted to highlight this one because it's a really good example of how to make maps and graphics when there isn't data there, especially in like the hours and a day following an event. So there's often these really amazing humanitarian response teams, but they might not be publishing the data, and it might not align with our internal timelines. So, and then other times when you're trying to cover a story, there's not even like OSM data out there, especially near Durna. So, and also the more I've worked with other countries' data, the more amazing US data, even though it's not great, it's really accessible. So, yeah, these breaking news stories are always a good way to develop your skills and being really adaptive and creative to find solutions. So for this story, luckily we had a few journalists in the area and they were able to get to Durna really quickly. So we actually, in this upper right, stitched together a bunch of photographs just to give it a more complete look at like the destruction, how the dams had failed and where they used to be. We also rely a lot on satellite imagery just to show destruction. We didn't have flood maps and we didn't have destruction maps yet to show the area. So for this map on the left, actually, we looked at satellite imagery and we manually traced those eye lines on the maps as well, because we didn't have the building footprint data that we needed. I think just the great thing about satellite imagery is that it's capturing events in real time and providing updates almost a day or two after. And they can also give you access to a lot of remote and inaccessible areas that our news crews can't get to quickly or safely. And I'm also traditionally not going out into a field, so I do a lot with satellite imagery just to help explain events. I've used it a lot for like Amazon rainforest destruction, hurricanes, a lot with Israel and Gaza war right now. I'm going to just like say, yeah, you don't have to be an expert in remote sensing data to like work with satellite imagery. This is one story where I didn't do the analysis myself, but relied on another organization called Massa Analytics, and they're using INSAR data, which is in interferometric synthetic aperture radar. So like that would be a lot, probably we're learning it in remote sensing class, but they're using that with Sentinel-1 to then create these raster maps that's showing where buildings have been destroyed. And so luckily, we work with a lot of really great organizations who are producing this data and are often helping us tell stories, and they're giving it to us. So they provide that raster data, and then I was able to clip it to the bounds of each of these refugee camps in Gaza and just show the destruction and the number of people also living in each of these refugee camps. Another story I've worked on for breaking news is our Trump investigations. I think we've actually updated this about 5 times in the last like year, and it's just a gift that keeps on giving. And I think one of the best compliments I got from one of our politics editors was like, I constantly look at this because I can never keep track of like everything that's happening. And I was like, whoa, a politics reporter saying that. Like that was like the big compliment. But I think, you know, a visual is just a really great way to help, you know, I don't know, compartmentalize like all the different things happening. And while it's also fun, the news is always changing. You often don't have to think about a project once it's published, but it is also really fruitful when a visualization can be updated over and over and scalable. So this is actually all built in Illustrator, so it's been a little bit of a pain to update every few months. But yeah, definitely looking back at this now, it might have been nice to build something a little bit more scalable. And speaking of scalability, there's always news events that are going to happen every year. every 2 years or even every 4, like the US elections. So my work this year is primarily working on building out an election tracker. So quite a big pivot for database stories. This has been really fun where it's only like 3 of us building this entire component system. So we are taking a bit of a shift this year. Usually we just end up building it from scratch and then say, oh, we have to do this again 4 years, and our bosses are like, we have invested too much time into this. So we're actually componentizing this system. So my main job earlier this year was actually building out a system and a script to pull all of the US Census data from the US Census Bureau's FTP site, downloading that, doing some simplification, and mostly using MapShaper, which is a really great tool for, just doing all types of cartographic work. I'm not using it in mapshaper.org itself, but instead running that locally. And so, and then also we're building that out. So in 2028, we can just like type in like download data for 2028 and for the house maps, and then it will just be able to run that fully. What's really fun about this is these are just I'm building our power bar right now. So we're pulling in 2020 test data, and then we have a slider that's looking at recreating the data over the night. We're using an API from a company called Madison. So a big challenge is working with just an API of data and wrangling all of that fun stuff. But also we're translating this into multiple languages, so we need to think a lot about does this work for really long, especially on mobile, like how does really long languages work here. The map is like, if you think you have to translate all 50 states and all of those towns and cities, we have a lot of translation work coming up for us. And also we're thinking too about Arabic, where the entire map, right to left. So there's a lot of fun things. I only pulled these, but I'm happy to talk about more things later. But we're like in the middle of development stage. We're just starting to get the maps to be flowing with data. So it's not too exciting yet, but it's getting there. So I just want to give some parting words for things I wish I would have known as a student, and also just advice other people have given me that I thought I would share. So first, let's just like look for inspiration and connection in the community. I think there's just so many smart people in this industry, and you should definitely leverage them for design inspiration. Take a look at like what other organizations are doing. You can find so much incredible stuff on the web. It just gives you a sense of what's possible. I'm like constantly on Observable, searching for like fun things other people do, or looking at flowing data's newsletter. And I know they're not always easy to attend, especially with funds, but conferences can be super valuable to meet people in the community and just hear what they're doing. And then you might learn a new way of processing data, a new way of visualizing that data, and friends along the way. I've seen a lot of you actually at Basis, so it's always really fun every year to check out. X is like a great community too, but I don't really know where it's going. But sometimes social media, LinkedIn, things like that can be a really good way to connect. Collaborate. I feel like in just the creative industry, where there's always new tools, techniques, and amazing work is being shared every second, it can really feel like you don't know enough, and that it's really hard to keep up. But my colleague Davey at one time told me maybe we're not supposed to know it all, and so I think about that often. This means there's usually someone else whose knowledge can really complement your own. So like just look for opportunities to collaborate and team up to create something amazing. Like my maps for that deep sea piece were then cool, but like they're like elevated so much by like the illustration that she's got there. And also don't be afraid to share your work often. Your colleagues or your friends, they're just gonna like make your work so much stronger. They're really gonna elevate your work. Use tools that work for you, but also don't be afraid to use new ones. So I purposely put like a million things on here because there's no one tool that will do the job, and 5 of these programs are probably also going to do the same job. So pick one that works for you. Oftentimes in the newsroom setting, like the results are what matter, not so much like the tools you use to get there. There's one caveat, like there are going to be the internal tools that you'll have to learn. For example, we use Spelt with Illustrator and Photoshop, and then, but you know, we really can use anything else along the way that's going to be help us be successful. Yeah, be confident. I feel like as a new grad, or anywhere you go, it can be intimidating, but you've got an degree in cartography, so you're an expert now too. And don't be afraid to express your opinions. Like, so if you're working on a story, just be confident in your reporting, your design decisions and ideas, but also be receptive to feedback. Especially for the journalism world, like keep a running list of ideas. Like, you never know when something's gonna stick through years after you thought about it, or like a relevant news peg comes up. Like, my coworker has a story about Bigfoot that he's just like, we need to use one day. He like brings it up every like 6 months, like, can we use Bigfoot story now? So just always keep a list of ideas. I have a notes app on my phone with a bunch of half-baked ideas when talking with friends and family. You just never know if you're gonna get an idea on a run or in the shower or anywhere else. Think about accessibility and responsive web design early in the design process. So if you're on a deadline, this can also often get like pushed aside and compromised. So you might not think about the mobile version, or you might forget to put in alt text. Just make sure like early in your careers that you're trying to actively approach this and everything you do, because sometimes you don't do it for a long time, it's hard to start doing it. And also if the company you go to doesn't have standards, you should definitely create them. I think there's a bunch of templates out there to get you started, so you don't have to reinvent it. Keep learning. I don't think this is going to be a problem for any of you. You're all here learning right now. But don't be afraid to learn something new, like coding or illustrating or cartography. People often want to help you too, like your colleagues, your manager, your community, just to help you keep growing in your skills. And it's pretty amazing how Reuters is such a diverse team. We have people who are really have backgrounds in everything. So, and they're always willing to show us how to like teach me new things along the way. And that's it. If there's any questions, happy to answer them. This is my email. And then if you want to just see more Reuters work, just go to reuters.com/graphics.
I'll say I don't talk about Bieber much anymore, but Taylor Swift is like everywhere. So yeah, I'm obsessed with this one. We have some moments for questions. If you need to leave and go to class, feel free to excuse yourself. But I want to make sure we can have a little dialogue here. All that clear. Claire, when you get a question, if you could repeat it before the recording.
So, well, I wrote the question down early on, but I was kind of wondering, so what do you do? But that kind of mean like, if you had a pie chart of like percentages of how you spend your time, what would that be? Or like if you have like a week, like the given week, like what do you focus on Monday, Tuesday versus like, you know, that kind of works.
Yeah. Okay. So the question is, if I had a pie chart for my breakdown of my week, what would it look like? That's hard. It really varies. It totally depends on like the story I'm on and what my goals are. For example, for the election work right now, like I would say 20% of my time is just like project managing and like looking at those tickets and making sure like I've got everything in order and I'm communicating correctly with my colleagues about things. Another maybe 40% is actually building that, working within the code and trying to wrangle the data and visualize it. And then the other 10%, 5% is meetings, 5 to 10% meetings. Another 10% is like design feedback and giving my coworkers feedback, but also people giving me feedback and I'm addressing that. So that's been my breakdown lately. But then when it's like a a news story, something that's breaking, then it's like 60% research ASAP, as fast as possible, finding out that story outline, what we're gonna talk about, brainstorming different visual ideas, doing a lot of chatting with coworkers, and then the other, yeah, that might be more like 70%, and then the other 30% is actually building it. So, yeah, there's a lot of like upfront work, and then luckily, usually the building is a lot faster because of that. But yeah, it really varies, so it's hard to give an exact.
My question is when you deal with breaking news, so, I mean, clearly a lot of, some of your articles, you probably have much more time on, and you get very detailed. Everything is beautiful. And then you have these instances of breaking news where it's just probably as important to get reads, to get it out there quickly. So how do you manage still wanting it to look good and separate yourself, but then also needing to fit a time, you know, have you found kind of a method that works to know when to stop, and it's like, okay, this has to go in order for it to be timely to.
Yeah, that's a great question. Oh, so the question is like, how do I know when to put the end date on a lot of the breaking news graphics, get them out the door in a timely manner for our clients? I think once our editors are helping us make those calls as well, but I think getting something where you feel like 70% of the, like, it feels good, like you're not misrepresenting the data, and you have it in an acceptable charter map is usually like it's good enough to be like, okay, this is acceptable to get out there. And then our editors for it. I will say the nice part about Reuters is like we're not trying to compete with the New York Times or the Washington Post, because they just have someone whose full job it is to get those out like as fast as possible. So we will spend an extra week thinking about like what can we contribute to this conversation, which will give us like maybe a day or two more to think about it, rather than like a 24-hour. We usually have like at least 2 or 3 days, and so we might for the Red Sea, when the Houthis were sending a lot of missiles at a lot of the ships in the ports, like instead of just like showing a missile attack map, we were trying to be like, what types of ships are they hitting? We try to often take like a different angle at it, but yeah, often it's try to get it as far as I can in my time as well. And if I don't feel like it's great, I'll hand that off to someone else who can usually have a fresh set of eyes and look at it and help, maybe add different things to what I was working on.
Thanks.
Chelsea has a question, but also could you activate the chat? Because you might have
Oh,
questions.
yeah.
That person's probably meeting well.
I think if you could just click on,
Oh, chat.
yeah.
Yeah.
chat.
Can I go to this one?
Yeah.
Okay. So you mentioned some of the software that you use. What are some of the others that draw inspirations from and say I those trends? Yeah, flowing data is a really great one. Egg and data and egg is really good. The 401, I have like a lot of I subscribe probably to every news agency, so I get a lot of their newsletters in the morning, as well as the apps. So I'll look often in the morning about like through various different websites. We at Reuters also every single morning we get sent an email with like what stories are in progress and where those are moving. So that gives us a good sense of also what's happening and the trends as well. I guess also like stay on top of these trends. Yeah, that's a good, I guess conferences are a good way to stay on top of new trends and just see what other people are using in the newsrooms. Yeah, social media is a good way as well. Often people are really good at sharing what they're using, and I think that's been a really helpful way. I'll keep thinking of that too.
So this first question, maybe a bit of a silly question, because you're such a incredibly creative person, but I think a challenge that many people have, especially when they're working on a deadline, is like how to generate ideas like very quickly, because there's just, it's not always like a lot of time to play around with different ideas before you just have to make something. So I was wondering, you showed us a little bit of some of your storyboarding process, but if you could maybe talk a little bit more about like kind of creating on the fly. I have a follow-up question for that if there's time.
Yeah, so the question is what is my idea generation look like for community stories or really quick turnaround stories? And I will say in our our team's channel, we would just like rapid fire, like spitballing ideas, and like half the times they're really bad, but like sometimes they're good. And so I think that's always really helpful. Also looking at like, you know, what else other people are producing in that moment, just to help us start like, especially if like if we're not sure exactly yet what like data source we're going to use, we might like look for like, oh, this first map and how can we like maybe that can just help us generate ideas as well. So I feel like colleagues are really helpful in this fast-paced news environment. And I don't know if there's one exercise that I try to do every once in a while, is like make common charts from one data set, just to like keep our brain like active and moving, just to like help you not always default to like the same bar chart every single time. But it's like getting up through time. It's just like we often will do like exercises every 2 weeks and as a group to like just make us not fall into the same pattern. So it's like maybe bringing 4 different stories to the group and like we'll analyze them and be like, what could have gone better? What could have we done differently? And look at other stories, but also we'll do sometimes like make 20 charts from a single data set just so you can get a little bit fresh. And those skills that you like practice there really help with your story that you're on.
So there's a great basis talk or little session or an exercise for all of us. That sounds like a lot of fun and also just great practice. So if there's time and nobody else has a question, I have a follow-up.
Are there any other questions?
So I have kind of a question about your process, because you mentioned like with the election stuff, like in the future having that all be scripted and whatever. But with your, I mean, I don't know how often I guess you're even getting to map the same part of the world or something like that. But like, do you have a process of going back to maps and like having that data ready to go, or like maybe with your charts, like do you just end up copying the same code base or something like that? So everybody's.
Yeah, so the question is like, do I have any repeat processes or databases that I use internally? No, not yet. Well, I'm slowly building it up, is what I would say the answer is. So when I came to Reuters, they're like, you're the first cartographer at Reuters in a long time. I was like, whoa, this is wild. So like, we like when I joined, there wasn't really a ton of like, here's like a database of all this, like unlike National Geographic, which has like, here's your boundary files, because they've all been like checked really thoroughly for like making sure we don't actually show up with the boundary correctly. Or this river is perfectly georeferenced at all these different Zoom level scales. So no, often it's me pulling data for that specific story. We're really, I mean, yeah, in the last year and a half, I don't think I've ever done a region twice as well, other than like national maps or something more at the national level. But I think I'm starting to like create my own folder where it's like it's all, especially if I find like a really interesting data set, I'll start pulling that in and that as a source for later on. Yeah, I don't think many of my colleagues don't. I would be really cool for what we need it. But we do have a GitHub. So if there is a story we're picking up on, I can just pull down someone's old project folder and actually grab that as well. But sometimes the TGIS file, if they use TGIS filing, those can be difficult to find, especially if they come from locally. Sometimes people aren't good at like archiving directing graphics. Yeah, but we're building it up slowly. This, the election stuff is very well documented though. On that part.
Any last questions? Should we conclude with Chelsea to follow
Okay, sure. All right. So this is also a question that I've been wondering about. Some of this is just my not trying to picture like what does this process look like with a team or potentially a large team of collaborators. I'm trying to imagine this. So the different people have different visions and different understandings of what this final product is going to be. And so like my imagination is that it's probably the editor that is sort of has final say or whatever, but I guess I'm trying to think about like how do these pieces interrelate? Like how do like different visions work together? And like and how do they synergize or like or if there's challenges there? If it's okay to talk a little bit about this, I'm curious to hear a little bit more to kind of understand how these just amazing graphics and visual storytelling products are being made.
Yeah, so the question is like, how do I synergize all the feedback and throughout the design process of making charts and maps? I think the nice part is like, not everyone our team is really nice, like it's been great, you know, it's like a full year, like sad type of map, so that's been like really great. Everyone's really receptive to feedback, and also gives feedback in a way that's been like very, easy to work with, and it makes it a good work environment, so that's been like a really nice thing. I also think that, the author usually has the say of like if they're going to incorporate something or not. Like often my editor often tells me it's just like thanks for the feedback, but like you end up not like implementing it later on. So you really do have the call on like how do you think that will like feedback's always very helpful, but you can make a call if they're included or not. It's not you don't always have to just because someone said something. But it can help store ideas too, like what if you actually changed it from this type of data to this type of data to this type, and then that's where you can maybe start some exploration and maybe try it out and share it. Yeah, often when I'm thinking about it and developing it, I'll be like, I have the final say.
Okay, so there's one person has the final say and people are providing.
Yeah.
Okay, but so I see, it's it's kind of streamlines up, so instead of having a bunch of people kind of coming at it, it is streamlined.
Yeah, it's a little bit like there's a single project owner throughout the process, and then there's like a ton of like collaboration happening all around, and a lot of people who are helping elevate the work you're doing, but not so much like telling you change this direction, change this direction. It's really just to help you take what you're doing faster.
Great. Well, that was an excellent talk, and it's been a memorable day in so many ways. I think one positive one is that Claire is the first person to present formally in the new Cartograph space that opened in January. And you're the first audience, so you were here when it all started. So let's thank Clare Trainor again for participating. Please feel free to introduce yourself. We can kind of gather around, hang out for a little bit after this as well.
So after that.